Why did you feel the need to write this book, Contextualization in the New Testament?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I went to the Philippines, I had been in my theological education in North America and Europe in Scotland for quite a number of years. And I was at this point really excited to share all this stuff that I had learned. And I was going to talk about the authorship and dates of the New Testament books and the nature of the historical resurrection of Christ and the history of biblical theology. And when I was talking about these things that I was very passionate about at the time, I got this kind of deer in the headlights look from most of my Asian students. And I had students from everywhere from Japan to Papua New Guinea and Korea to Western Samoa. And they were just kind of looking at me blankly. And I realized that a lot of the questions that I was answering were not questions that they were asking. And so I think I did something that was fairly intelligent at the time. I began to listen to my students. And I realized that they were asking different questions about the New Testament. Some of their questions had to do with things like, what does the New Testament have to say about suffering and oppression? What does it say about our encounter with the spiritual powers of this world? How does the Bible relate to the sacred writings of other Asian religions? Does the Bible have anything to say about whether we should worship ancestors? And I realized that in all of my education in the West, we hadn't dealt with those kind of questions. And so it forced me to go back to the New Testament and to begin to look at it through a different lens and to try to ask, what might the New Testament have to say to inform those kind of discussions? And it forced me, even though I knew what contextualization was about, I'd studied it theoretically before that, but it forced me to have to really do contextualization in that context that was one that was very unfamiliar with to me at the time. And so I began to ask, well, maybe are there some things in the New Testament itself that might help us in this process? Because up until that point, most of the things that I had read about contextualization were coming out of fields like anthropology and cross-cultural communication and contextual theology, and those were all great, but I hadn't seen much that had been written from a biblical perspective. And so I began to look into the New Testament, and I realized that there are some precedents, some patterns in the New Testament that can really help us with this process that we're all engaged in, but it was something that was a part of the Christian mission from the very beginning. And so that's kind of what got me on that journey, I think.
This is why I loved your book. It takes you into the world of the New Testament, and you start to see, wait a minute, they were doing this from the very beginning. This isn't something new. This isn't something that people are saying, hey, you're compromising the gospel. This was something at the very essence of Christianity from the very beginning, because they're trying to communicate a faith that had come from Judaism into a Gentile world. And they had to find concepts, they had to find illustrations, they had to find all these different pieces.